She hunted his kind for years. Then he looked at her like no one ever had. The hunter's mission. Celine Valorian adjusted the crystalline diadem on her forehead, its cool surface a stark contrast to the heat of frustration coursing through her veins. The mirror reflected her pale violet skin, luminescent in the dim light of her personal quarters aboard the Austrian diplomatic vessel Celestial Voyager. Her silver eyes narrowed as she rehearsed the diplomatic phrases that felt like ash on her tongue. "For the glory of the Austrian Empire," she whispered. The formal greeting hollow after years spent tracking and containing human expansion efforts across the galaxy. Now they wanted her to smile and negotiate with them. The irony wasn't lost on her. Ambassador Valorian, the ship's communication system chimed. "High Counselor Viridian requests your presence in the strategic chamber." Celine straightened her ceremonial robes, deep blue adorned with the constellation patterns of her homeworld, and made her way through the gleaming corridors. Fellow Astrians bowed respectfully as she passed. At 32 stellar cycles, she was the youngest ever appointed to the rank of Imperial Ambassador, her reputation built on successful containment operations against human colony ships that ventured too close to Austrian territory. High Counselor Viridian was waiting, his ancient face mapped with the wisdom lines that marked Astrian elders. Holographic displays showed Earth's solar system rotating slowly in the chamber's center. "Ambassador," he acknowledged, his voice carrying the musical tones of their native language. "You understand the delicacy of your assignment?" "I do, Counselor," Celine replied, keeping her distaste carefully masked. "Though I question the wisdom of diplomatic engagement with a species so unconstrained." Viridian's expression remained impassive. "Your reservations are noted, but the Council has spoken. Humans have demonstrated technological advancements that concern us. Their reproductive patterns and resource consumption continue at alarming rates, which is precisely why we should be strengthening our borders, not opening them," Celine countered. The Counselor activated another hologram, statistics on human expansion across their sector of the galaxy. "Knowledge, Ambassador. We need to understand them better to protect ourselves effectively. Your experience hunting their expansion vessels makes you uniquely qualified." Celine studied the data with practiced efficiency. "Their breeding habits are repulsive. No genetic regulation, no population controls. They form pair bonds based on primitive chemical reactions rather than proper genetic compatibility algorithms. Yet they've colonized 17 worlds in less than 2 centuries, Viridian noted. Something in their chaotic approach is working. The ship's alert system indicated their approach to Earth's orbit. Celine felt a flutter of unease. She had tracked humans, studied them, contained them, but never engaged with them directly. "Remember," Viridian cautioned, "your mission is information gathering. Learn their weaknesses, understand their intentions. The diplomatic language is merely a veneer." Celine nodded, her resolve hardening. "For the Empire, one final warning," Viridian added, his tone darkening. "Humans possess unusual abilities of persuasion. Their chaotic emotions are infectious. Many species have fallen under their influence. Do not underestimate them." As she departed for the shuttle bay, Celine reviewed her mental catalog of human weaknesses. Their short lifespans, their emotional decision-making, their primitive attachment to physical contact. Vulnerabilities, all of them. What she refused to acknowledge even to herself was the small spark of curiosity that had ignited within her. For all her years hunting humans across the stars, she had never truly understood what drove them. Perhaps this mission would finally provide answers and better methods to control their dangerous expansion. The Earth loomed large in the viewport now, blue and green and achingly alive. Celine steeled herself for what was to come. She was a hunter at heart, and this was simply a new kind of hunt. Unexpected encounter. The New Geneva International Space Embassy gleamed like a jewel against Earth's horizon, its transparent domes capturing starlight in ways that even Celine had to admit were beautiful. Her shuttle docked with practiced precision, and she took a final moment to center herself before facing the humans directly. "Ambassador Valorian," a mechanical voice announced, Earth's United Planetary Council welcomes you to humanity's home. Celine stepped through the airlock, her senses immediately assaulted by the richness of Earth's atmosphere. Too dense, too fragrant, filled with organic compounds that made her translator implant work overtime filtering the input. The welcoming committee consisted of 5 humans in formal attire, their skin tones varying in ways that still struck her as biologically inefficient. Ambassador, the central figure stepped forward, extending a hand before quickly withdrawing. Forgive me. I was briefed on Austrian customs regarding physical contact. Celine's gaze fixed on him, taller than the others, with deep brown skin and eyes the unusual color of Earth's amber gemstones. His hair was cropped close to his scalp, and the formal diplomatic uniform did little to disguise the physicality, typical of his species. I am Dominic Reed, Cultural Liaison for the United Planetary Council, he continued, his voice carrying none of the harshness Celine had expected from human vocal cords. We're honored by the Austrian Empire's willingness to establish formal relations. The honor is mutual, Celine replied, the rehearsed words tasting foreign on her tongue. The Austrian High Council seeks greater understanding between our civilizations. Dominic's eyes crinkled slightly at their corners, a micro-expression her training identified as skepticism. Interesting, perhaps this human was not as naive as she'd anticipated. I've been assigned as your primary contact during negotiations, he explained as they walked through corridors bustling with representatives from 24 spacefaring species. My background is in xenoanthropology, with a focus on governance, systems. I'm particularly fascinated by the Austrian approach to societal organization. Celine maintained perfect diplomatic composure while internally cataloging every detail about him. His stride was confident but not aggressive, his attention clearly focused on her rather than scanning for opportunities or advantages. Fascinating is a curious word choice, she replied. Most species find our efficiency intimidating. Efficiency has its place, Dominic acknowledged, leading her toward the conference chambers. But so does adaptation. Different approaches, same goal, survival. Before she could formulate a properly dismissive response, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Emergency lights bathed the corridor in pulsing red. Security breach in Sector 7, announced a calm voice over the facility's communication system. All diplomatic personnel, please proceed to designated safety zones. Dominic's demeanor transformed instantly, his casual diplomatic manner replaced by focused alertness. That's near the environmental controls, he said, checking a data panel on his wrist. Ambassador, I should escort you to— Your environmental systems are compromised? Celine interrupted, her hunter's instincts overriding diplomatic protocol. What species atmospherics are maintained in that sector? 3 delegations, Caladan's Vortex Collective and— His eyes widened fractionally, the Austrian secondary delegation. Without hesitation, Celine moved toward the nearest emergency access panel. Show me the fastest route to Sector 7. Ambassador, protocol requires— Mr. Reed, she cut him off sharply. I have more experience with atmospheric sabotage than your entire security team. Your protocols are irrelevant. To her surprise, Dominic didn't argue further. Instead, he quickly accessed the panel, revealing a schematic of the station. This way, he said, and please, it's Dominic. As they raced through the corridors, Celine found herself reevaluating the human beside her. His response had been neither emotional panic nor rigid adherence to procedure, both reactions she would have predicted from his species. Instead, Dominic Reed had adapted instantly, prioritizing effective action over protocol. It was almost Austrian in its pragmatism. The thought was unsettling in ways she wasn't prepared to examine. Crisis and connection. The acrid smell of electrical fire filled the corridor as Celine and Dominic reached Sector 7. Emergency systems were struggling to contain the damage, with technicians frantically working at control panels while security personnel evacuated diplomatic staff. The environmental systems for the Austrian delegation are on backup power, a harried technician reported as they approached. We have maybe 20 minutes before critical failure. Dominic immediately took charge, his voice carrying an authority. Celine hadn't anticipated. Evacuate everyone from adjacent chambers. Redirect power from non-essential systems. Celine moved to the nearest terminal, her fingers flying across the unfamiliar human interface. Your systems are archaic, she muttered. But I can see the sabotage pattern. This wasn't random. Targeted? Dominic asked, suddenly at her shoulder. Precisely, she pointed to the schematics. The attack specifically compromised the methane-nitrogen mix required by Astrian physiology. Not immediately lethal, but enough to incapacitate. Their eyes met briefly, a moment of shared understanding that needed no translation. Access is restricted through this terminal, she continued. I need direct contact with the environmental mainframe. Dominic nodded. Maintenance shaft 12B this way. The shaft was barely wide enough for two people, forcing them into uncomfortable proximity as they descended toward the station's core systems. Celine was acutely aware of the human's body heat, the rhythm of his breathing, the unexpected grace with which he navigated the cramped space, so different from the lumbering predators she'd been trained to expect. You've done this before, she observed. Dominic's smile flashed in the dim emergency lighting. Before diplomatic service, I worked station security. Started in maintenance. Best way to understand how things really function. At the mainframe junction, Celine immediately identified the sabotage device, an elegant piece of technology that had bypassed standard security protocols. This is Trilaxian design, she said, carefully disconnecting it. Advanced, but I've encountered similar devices near human colonies in the Scorpius sector. Dominic's expression darkened. The Trilaxian consortium has been pushing against our borders for years. They oppose any new alliances. Working together in the confined space, they restored the environmental systems with 7 minutes to spare. The proximity was uncomfortable for Celine. Astrians rarely touched even among their own kind, and the constant contact with Dominic's shoulder against hers, his hands occasionally brushing hers as they worked, was overwhelming. More disturbing was how quickly she adapted to it. Why did you help? Dominic asked as they climbed back up toward the main level. Your primary delegation wasn't affected. Protocol would have kept you safe in the diplomatic quarters. Celine paused, realizing she had no diplomatic answer prepared. The truth was uncomfortable. She had acted on instinct, not calculation. Efficiency, she finally replied. I had the expertise to resolve the situation quickly. Dominic studied her face with unexpected intensity, those amber eyes seeing more than she wished to reveal. Is that the only reason? The question hung between them, dangerous in its simplicity. Celine felt something unfamiliar stirring beneath her carefully controlled exterior, a recognition that disturbed her more than any security breach. We should report to security, she deflected, moving toward the exit. Dominic caught her arm gently, the contact sending an unexpected current through her. Ambassador Celine, what I saw back there wasn't just technical expertise. You risked yourself for others. That's not efficiency. That's compassion. You presume to understand Astrian motivations, she countered, her voice sharper than intended. Presume to recognize when someone's actions don't match their supposed cultural programming. His voice softened. Your people have spent years containing ours, limiting our expansion. I've studied the reports. But what I just witnessed doesn't align with the cold, calculating image you project. Celine pulled away, uncomfortable with both his insight and her own confused reactions. You know nothing about me, Dominic Reed. I know you just saved lives without hesitation. He replied simply. Including mine. As they emerged into the corridor, surrounded once again by the ordered chaos of the diplomatic response team, Celine found herself unable to dismiss his words. Worse, she couldn't dismiss the unfamiliar sensation building within her, a recognition that perhaps, in her years of hunting humans across the stars, she had missed something fundamental about them and about herself. Barriers breaking. The investigation into the sabotage consumed the next 3 days, forcing Celine and Dominic into extended proximity that challenged every preconception she held about humans. They analyzed security footage, interviewed station personnel, and traced the Trilaxian device's components to their source. Through it all, Dominic demonstrated an analytical precision that rivaled her own, coupled with an intuitive understanding of motives that repeatedly proved valuable. The device components were smuggled aboard separately, Dominic concluded as they reviewed their findings in a private security office. But the assembly required intimate knowledge of both human and Astrian technology. Selena nodded, studying the holographic reconstruction. Someone wants these negotiations to fail, or they want to ensure we remain divided against a common threat. Dominic leaned back in his chair, fatigue evident in the lines around his eyes. He'd barely rested since the incident, his dedication surprising her. The small office forced them to work side by side, their shoulders occasionally touching as they examined evidence. Each contact sent disconcerting ripples through Selena's normally disciplined mind. Astrians didn't experience such reactions. Physical proximity was functional, nothing more. Yet she found herself increasingly aware of Dominic's movements, his scent, the cadence of his speech. "You should rest," she found herself saying. "Humans require more sleep than Astrians." Dominic smiled, the expression transforming his face in ways that fascinated her. "Concerned for my welfare, Ambassador?" "Efficiency," she replied automatically, though the excuse sounded hollow even to her ears. "Compromised cognitive function. Benefits no one." "Of course." His smile suggested he understood more than she'd intended to reveal. "Before I go, there's something I've been meaning to ask you." Selene tensed imperceptibly. "Yes?" "Your file indicates you personally led operations against 17 human expansion vessels. You tracked us, studied us, contained us." His eyes held hers, unaccusing but unwavering. "Why?" The question stripped away diplomatic pretense, leaving only the truth she'd carried for years. "Humans are dangerous," she said finally. "Your reproduction is unregulated, your expansion unchecked. You consume resources at unsustainable rates. Every analysis predicted you would destabilize galactic order within 3 generations. And now, after working alongside one of these dangerous humans?" Selene looked away, unable to maintain eye contact. "Now I find inconsistencies in my data." Dominic moved closer, his proximity sending her pulse racing in ways her training hadn't prepared her for. "Inconsistencies?" "You value life," she admitted reluctantly. "Not just human life. You risked yourself to save my delegation, beings you've never met. Your actions demonstrate the consideration beyond self-interest. Is that so surprising?" "Yes." The honesty felt both dangerous and liberating. The Astrian Council portrays humans as primitive, driven by reproduction and resource acquisition. But I've witnessed something else entirely. Something shifted in Dominic's expression. A softening, a recognition that made Selene acutely aware of how close they were standing. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "both our peoples have been operating on incomplete information." He reached out slowly, giving her every opportunity to withdraw, and touched her hand. The contact was electric, overwhelming, nothing like the clinical descriptions in her xenobiology training. Human skin against hers, warm, alive, intentional. "In Astrian culture," she managed, her voice uncharacteristically unsteady. "Physical contact is reserved for—" "I know," Dominic interrupted gently. "I've studied your customs, your biology, your social structures, just as thoroughly as you've studied ours." Selene looked down at their joined hands, violet against brown, alien against human, hunter against hunted. Everything in her training demanded she pull away, report this inappropriate contact, maintain the barriers between their species. Instead, she found herself turning her hand within his, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that felt simultaneously foreign and inevitable. "This is forbidden," she whispered. Dominic's free hand rose to her face, fingertips tracing the luminescent markings along her cheekbone with reverent curiosity. Most meaningful things begin that way. When he leaned forward, She knew what would happen, had seen human mating rituals in countless observation files. She should stop this, maintain professional boundaries, remember her mission. Instead, Celine Valorian, the Empire's most dedicated human hunter, closed her eyes and leaned into the kiss, surrendering to the connection she'd spent years denying was possible. In that moment, every barrier she'd constructed, professional, cultural, personal, began crumbling, leaving her in terrifying, exhilarating freefall. New beginnings. The summons from High Counselor Viridian arrived precisely when Celine had feared it would. 6 days after the sabotage incident, 4 days after she had crossed lines no Astrian diplomat had ever crossed before. "The Council requires your immediate report," the message stated coldly. "Evidence suggests protocol violations of the highest order." Celine stood at the viewport in her private quarters, watching Earth rotate slowly below. In less than a day, she would be recalled to the Celestial Voyager, face judgment for her actions, likely be stripped of her rank and subjected to emotional reconditioning. The door chimed softly. "Enter," she called, knowing already who it would be. Dominic stepped inside, his formal diplomatic attire replaced by simple civilian clothing. The change suited him, making him appear more accessible, more human, more dangerous to everything she had once believed. "You've been summoned back," he said. "Not a question." "Yes." Celine turned from the viewport. "My actions have been deemed inconsistent with Imperial interests. They know about us." The simplicity of the statement, "us," sent a tremor through her carefully maintained composure. 4 days of stolen moments, of conversations that stretched from diplomatic policy to personal philosophy, of touches that had awakened sensations she'd never imagined possible. 4 days that had dismantled 2 decades of certainty. "The Astrian Council monitors its representatives closely," she confirmed, "especially those with my security clearance." Dominic crossed the room, stopping just short of touching her. Even now he respected her boundaries, waiting for permission. The consideration in the gesture only strengthened the ache in her chest. "What will they do?" "Reconditioning, most likely. They'll erase the emotional aberrations, restore my proper Astrian perspective." Her voice remained steady, though the prospect filled her with unprecedented dread. "I'll forget this, us. And if you don't return?" The question hung between them, treasonous in its implications. Defection was unheard of among Astrians. Their loyalty was biochemically reinforced from birth, their connection to the collective consciousness of their people a fundamental aspect of their identity. "I would be incomplete," she said finally. "Cut off from my people, my purpose. But free to discover a new purpose." Dominic's amber eyes held hers, offering not demand but possibility. "The universe is vast, Celine. There are places beyond Astrian or human control, worlds where different species build connections rather than barriers." Her hand rose to his face, tracing the contours that had become precious to her in so short a time. "You make it sound simple." "It isn't," he acknowledged. "Nothing worthwhile ever is." The truth of what had happened between them crystallized in that moment. It wasn't merely physical attraction or diplomatic compromise. Something fundamental had shifted in her understanding of what connection could be. Voluntary rather than programmed, chosen rather than assigned. "The Trilaxians targeted our negotiations because they fear what might happen if Astrians and humans truly understood each other," she realized aloud. "If we could overcome centuries of mistrust, create alliance instead of containment, we could change the balance of power in the galaxy," Dominic finished. "Together." The communication panel chimed insistently, the shuttle preparing for her departure. Time had run out. Celine moved to her console, her decision crystallizing with each step. Her fingers flew across the interface, accessing classified Astrian security protocols, intelligence reports on Trilaxian movements, containment strategies against human expansion, information that could change the course of galactic politics. "What are you doing?" Dominic asked, watching as she transferred the data to an encrypted channel. "Making a choice." She completed the transfer, then turned to face him. I spent years hunting your kind, Dominic Reed. I believed I was protecting the galaxy from chaos, but perhaps what the galaxy truly needs is not perfect order, but balanced connection. She reached for him then, no longer hesitant, no longer conflicted. The touch of her hand against his sealed a decision that would reshape not just her life, but potentially the future of their peoples. The Astrian Empire has been containing human expansion because they fear what they don't understand, she said. I can't change their minds from within the system, but perhaps with what I know, with what I've experienced. Dominic's hands enveloped hers, warm and steady. You're talking about becoming a bridge. I'm talking about becoming something neither of our peoples anticipated. Celine allowed herself a small smile, the expression still unfamiliar on her features. The hunter becoming advocate. The shuttle would depart without her. The council would declare her compromised, perhaps even send others to retrieve her. The path ahead was uncertain, dangerous, everything her orderly Astrian existence had never been. But as Dominic drew her into an embrace that defied every boundary she'd been taught to maintain, Celine Valorian understood that sometimes the greatest discoveries came not from hunting across the stars, but from allowing oneself to be found. Where do we begin? She whispered against his shoulder. His answer was simple, perfect in its human directness. Together.